Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, so tonight I'm joined by Ricky Green, a real West Texas legend that I got to meet a couple years ago and have a nice conversation with him and hear about what it was like out there early on. So, how are you doing today, Mister Green?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Just day at work, slinging rat poop, and then getting the opportunity to do this. So I can't complain. It's a good day.
Somebody's got to do it.
There you go. There you go. We gotta make food for as many people as we can.
Yeah.
All right. So, what was? We'll start off with just kind of your early history of going out there and what you were doing and what brought you to West Texas. So, what brought you to West Texas?
Well, my brother actually, when I was like 14, 1969, he and his wife and I came out here in his 1972 Volkswagen Beetle and spent about a week just roaming around out here because obviously I didn't know what I was doing and he was pretty new to it at the time. So he eventually came back to go to Sol Ross and lived out here for several years, different times.
Was there any? Were you looking for reptiles, or were you just out there kind of exploring and seeing what was going on out there?
Well, we were looking for reptiles. We didn't have a lot of luck because it was early April, I believe, and it was windy and cold at night. And we did some field collecting, but we found a few lizards, collared lizards, and things, but not not much at night. Um, I guess the best find in the whole trip was we were walking through the San Antonio Zoo and saw a pair of ribbon snakes breeding in the grass.
That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool anytime you get to observe some of the behavior that we would see in captivity. See that in the wild, and what are the chances for you to be in that spot at that time and get to see that, no matter what species it is?
That's right, very slim.
Yeah, yeah. What was So when did you move out to West Texas, or when did you first go out there and kind of really stick to it?
I went. I made a lot of trips out here through the '70s, and in 1983, I moved to Ozona, which is just north of Juneau, and I hunted Juneau Road that whole summer, uh, and had quite a bit of luck on that road. But I always wanted to live here, so after about a year of that, I just finally said I'm just going to do it and moved down here the end of '83 and stayed on and off most of the '80s. I went back in '86 and worked in the reptile department of the Caldwell Zoo in Tyler, Texas, and then went from there to the Fort Worth Zoo reptile department and learned a lot. Had great experiences there. Worked with some really good people and had one of the biggest, best collections at the time. We bred a lot of things that hadn't been bred before, and mine were mostly my section was native Texas animals, but I had some other things too. But that was kind of my deal. But I got homesick for Terlingua and moved back to Terlingua out of '87, I think. Stayed for a couple of years and then went to Tucson to work on an exhibit, a nocturnal exhibit at the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum with Frank Reedus.
So you had a lot of early kind of zoo experience. That's pretty cool. And then also how Terlingua called you back. It's kind of like a virus. Once it gets in your blood, you just the draw to go back to West Texas doesn't end.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't recommend you come out here unless you want to come out here forever because it's all I thought about until I finally got to move out here. And of course, that was in the 80s, and that was a really wet part of, that time. It, the collective was just great. It's so much different than it is now.
What were kind of the numbers, and I guess and specifically Alterna was. I know you've come across basically everything or everything that is out here. I
Yeah,
assume we're talking about numbers. The main focus is going to be Alterna, correct?
Alterna were from '83. I think I saw 11 Alterna on Juneau Road.
Oh wow.
Then I moved here, and I had a girlfriend at the time. We averaged 13 Alterna a year for most of the '80s. Uh, some some better years, some not so good years, but like I said, all through the '80s until about 1990, we're pretty wet out here, so we were seeing a lot of animals, maybe as many as 40, 45 a night. I'd say average for June and July was probably 30, 35 snakes a night. And I was also doing some work with Coleonyx reticulatus at the time with Dr. Dixon from A&M, and I had a permit to collect reticulatus and document any DORs or county records, anything like that, because throughout the '80s it was illegal to actually hunt alterna. So I won't confess to collecting any, but I did see quite a few.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've heard from other folks that that was like the best time for their field herping out there was when there was higher regulations against it at that time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it was a good time. Sure, a good time to be here. And like I said, it hasn't been that way since. I don't. It won't be again in my lifetime, but hopefully you guys will get to see a good wet few years out here.
And do you think that that's kind of the main detractor in what we're seeing numbers wise now is the lack of rain that we've had over the last 14 plus years here? Um, or do you think how much of early on field herping, right? I wasn't there, but you hear the stories about just getting really pounded, and then you hear stuff like the Chamberlains and those early families collecting hundreds of animals out of that kind of Juneau Sanderson area. Do you think that plays a factor in the diminishment of what we see, or do you think it is mainly weather based?
I think it's some of everything here in particular. If we're talking about Terlingua, say the Christmas Mountains and River Road, I think the increase in traffic from visitors to the park, to Big Bend National Park, and then now uh, Big Bend Ranch State Park has drawn so many people down here that I think the traffic has done a lot of damage, and you can kind of prove that if you look at it just by going uh, west of Lajitas, say on 170 to the River Road. You see a lot more snakes west of Lajitas because there's nothing west of Lajitas, so nobody goes there at night when most of the snakes are active. The only people west of there are collectors, so uh, the numbers are way down even there, but they are much better than they are, say, on 118, where I spent most of my time back then, seeing tons of snakes every night. And now you can, hunt that area, that stretch all night long and see 4 or 5 snakes. I'd say it's down at least 60%
Yeah.
off on 118, and probably 40 to 45, maybe 50% on 170, River Road. Back
Yeah.
then, I kept good notes all through the 80s. I kept a log every night of what we saw, time, temperature, date, weather conditions, things like that. And I can compare, the same month now to that month back in the 80s. And you know, it's just hard to believe the difference.
Yeah. And is that mainly not just an animal difference, but just weather difference?
Well, the weather too, you know, uh, then I think our average annual rainfall was around, they said 12 inches, but through the 80s, I think it was more like 14, which doesn't seem like much. But the average annual rainfall the last few years has been around 7 inches. Last year, I had property here that are kind of in the foothills of the Christmas Mountains, and I got 3.7 inches for the year.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean that's a huge decrease over time, and the
Yeah.
pressure that must be putting on those animals, and with the additional road traffic. And that was something, the 118 that we know now, that we see, it wasn't always that way. Is that correct?
No, it wasn't. In the 80s, I think it was 1990 that they started to widen that road, but prior to that, it was a one lane, a 2 lane, no shoulder with, brush and habitat that came right up to the edge of the road. And now, they keep it mowed and pushed back. And some places it's 4 lanes with a shoulder and completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were there when they widened the road, correct?
I didn't know. Yes and no. I was there for a short period of time, but uh, I was in Arizona uh, when they started widening it. I came out here for a trip, and it was just rubble. I mean, they had dynamited the cuts, and um, it was just it was dirt road, and just one lane in a lot of places, and just mountains were just rubble. The cuts that we looked at were just gone.
And the Christmas Mountains, that used to be, was there another name for that early on? Was it like the La Luna or something like that? There was a restaurant that was out there,
Yeah, the old timers call it Luna Vista
Luna Vista.
because there was a restaurant at the bottom of the North Hill, between the North and South Hill, uh, called the Luna Vista Restaurant. The building's still there, but it's a home now instead of a
Yes, sir.
restaurant.
Yeah, actually, I know the guy that owns that property, and I've gotten to walk that property and go up on top of the little ridge around it. And I've not done it at night, but I got to do it in the day, and it seems like a very interesting spot for sure.
It is. It is.
It's and so and I imagine seeing that destruction in that area, kind of going through and seeing that landscape change. Um, was that devastating at the time? And did you see more animals after that or less?
Well, I only made the one trip that year, and I was honestly pretty bummed out about the whole deal. And I didn't even hunt uh, that area. I just left. I couldn't stand to look at it. But the people smarter than me stayed, and they collected a lot of alternative that year. Uh, Dynamiting those cuts and all that just drove everything out, and it was great for the people that did go and hunt.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of gets the theory, right, that when you're walking a cut, that animal, you hear some people think that, okay, they just kind of accidentally pop out. And you know, I don't know how much I subscribe to that, but it would make sense if the face of that structure kind of got pushed back, and those animals are struggling to kind of find their new pathways or what they're doing, that they're going to be popping out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think they were pretty much homeless.
Mm,
Their homes had just been destroyed where they spent most of their days was gone, and I think they were just looking for a place to be.
yeah, yeah, trying to find their kind of their niche, their little home spot. And that does seem to be kind of the way that's going. I forget the name of the gentleman, but not too long ago, there was a guy that did some radio telemetry stuff with, I think, like an individual gray band. Have you seen that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, right? Because that was something that, I know it's definitely come up in conversations about how cool would that be to see what they do.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna do a really bad job of quoting kind of what this was, so I'll link it to you after this because it was pretty interesting.
yeah, that'd be great.
But the animal was moving a decent amount of distance, and it was kind of running a regular routine, and it appeared to be up over ground moving, and then would kind of hit similar areas, and then go back to its little home territory. So I
That's
think
kind of what I always suspected, but never had any kind of proof of it.
yeah. And again, it was one individual animal. Um, and there was some other stuff about where those animals were brumating, kind of how they were moving. And it was just very interesting, just kind of very overall. Like I said, I'll send it to you after we're done here tonight. I'll try
Oh.
to find wherever I remember seeing that. Well, what was your what was your first Alterna? Was it Blair's phase, Alterna phase? What was that night like?
It was uh, it was an alternate phase from the Christmas Mountains, and it was a light phase, almost a textbook alternate. I remember as a kid I had Conant's field guide to reptiles and amphibians of the eastern, central, and eastern United States. I think it was called. And he had a picture in there of three different alterna: Blair's phase, a kind of a dark alterna phase, and then a light phase alterna. And I remember looking at that book like 1,000 times, like they were going to change or have a new picture in there. But it was almost identical to the light phase alterna in that field guide, with just a little orange on the nuchal and the first couple of bands, and then a couple of bands of orange, towards the tail. Not much, but still, my very first alterna, and it was really cool. I learned the alterna boogie that night. I don't think I invented it, but I used it. I sure enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, that feeling when you finally grab one, that I don't know if there's a better rush for me personally, where it's like
Yeah,
holy crap, they're real. You
yeah,
know.
and it over the past 50 something years, it really hadn't changed that much. So, you know, you still have something to look forward to.
Yes.
It's,
Yes.
everyone's so much different, and they're always unexpected. I do remember thinking back in the 80s, we were seeing quite a few. And I say I was seeing 13 a year, but I had a lot of friends out here that would come and stay with me. And nights I didn't see one, they saw one, and it was just like almost every night somebody was catching an alterna. And I only got a few of them, but I got to see a lot of them, and they're just all different. And it was, and back then it was so much fun. The camaraderie was a little different. It was kind of new to everybody back then, in the late 70s, early 80s. Um, there were a few guys that had been out here longer than me, but not a lot of guys. So we were all kind of learning back then.
Yeah. And that kind of makes sense, And now I would say that the field herping in general, and field herping for alternate in particular, it's a very gate kept hobby, and I'm definitely guilty of it myself, and I don't plan on changing. I don't give out locations, and I'm very uh, I keep a lot of the information to myself, on what I want to see and the conditions where I feel, are going to be good. And I don't know how much of that, personally is just greed that if I cannot find them, I don't want anyone else to find them, or I could justify it and say, well, it's I'm protecting the species. I don't want it. I want a chance to find them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, back then we shared everything, and it was a lot more fun when you could do that. I mean, it's not like anything we kept to ourselves were big secrets. I mean, they were in the Christmas Mountains and they were on the River Road, so you may not have known the exact spot, but you were in the right area,
Yeah.
and sooner or later. But things change, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like as information is more readily available, people get more kind of uptight about it. I don't know the correlation there, but it does seem to be that way. What early on, I think when we kind of switch into Subak here for a minute and chat about those, I think that one of the more iconic pictures that I've seen online with West Texas herping is definitely the picture of the blonde coming out of the road that you took. What was going on there?
Which tell me again.
So there was a picture of it looks like a crack in the road, and there seems to be a blonde subbot kind of sticking its head out.
Mm, Gosh, I tell you, I can't even remember that. Sadly, I
Gotcha.
I got one, a pic of one in a crevice that was, uh, that I was walking a cut and saw. Is that you think that's it?
It might be. I might be mistaking too. Maybe I'm mixing this up with someone else's photo, which I very well could be. Um, how many blondes have you found?
I don't know. Gosh, more than I have. Well, no, about the same, I guess, as Alterna. Um, now I find two or three or four a year. Back in the '70s, they were. In the '80s, they were a lot more scarce. I mean, I lived on Pepper's Hill, which was where the first few came from. Pepper's Hill was known as the place to go hunt blondes. But I probably, if I saw one or two a year back then, it was a good year. And that seems to be, I mean, if I look back at my notes and look at things now, not blondes necessarily, but maybe two. I think blonde sabbats are one thing that survived all the droughts and all the traffic and all the everything. I mean, it's the only snake here that I think I see more of now than I did back in the '80s.
Huh, that's interesting. And I think that blondes. This is something that came up last time I was discussing with my buddy Adam. That blondes seem to make sense. The way their color changes, they only blend in more with the limestone around them,
Right.
and so I don't think it harms them at all to be blonde. And I think that's. I wonder if over time it's more common to see a blonde than a normal phase animal.
I think it will be that at some point. Uh, just mainly, I would only say that because it seems like their range over the years has spread so far. Uh, there were never, let's see, in '87, '88, '89, my brother found one between just before Fresno Creek, which is, say, 5 or 6 miles west of Lajitas. And at the time, that was the farthest west anybody had ever seen one, as far as I know. And now they're fairly common on the Big Hill and and even west of the Big Hill. And they've shown up on like 385, uh, South of Marathon, Black Gap. I mean, that's a huge range extension from what we thought it was back then. We may have been wrong, but there were tons of people hunting Black Gap and 385 back then when they never showed up until I don't know, probably the last 10 years.
Yeah. And a lot of those animals that, not a lot, but the animals that I've seen from those more southern ranges, they they seem to have like a weird colored head where their heads are a little darker than the rest of their body. I don't know if you've noticed that.
The normals or the blondes?
The blondes.
Some do, but I think it's the young ones. I think as they,
Yes. Yeah, it does seem to be the young ones. I don't know if it sticks with them as they get older.
yeah, I don't think
Um,
it does, but I agree. I've seen some. I know what you're saying. I've seen a lot of them that have almost a grayish color head. Some of them.
yeah. Yeah. It's weird, right? Where it's like, huh, I wonder why. I wonder why that's popping out there.
We may just be seeing their skull through their transparent skin. I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be a good point. That might be correct. Yeah, because I don't seem to keep it from what I've seen, which is unfortunate because that'd be really cool to have a darker colored head and then a light body. I think that
Yep.
would be pretty cool, kind of like the Mexican bears.
Yep.
Over time, have you ever gone down to Mexico? Have you ever done any field herping down there?
I've been down there a few times. I didn't. I haven't been like at their country or any of that. Just south of the border here, uh,
Gotcha.
a little more kind of. I don't even know what to call it. I'm afraid to say anything because it might be illegal.
Yeah, no, no, I get you. I get you. No, no, just south of the border. Interesting. Yeah, that's one day we hopefully I'll make it over there and give it a go. Um, Kind of what were some of the early characters out there when you were field herping? I know I got the opportunity to meet Ray Duncan. That kind of a story came out when I was speaking to him about, I think blaming you on running over a gray band, and I don't think that that was the case. I think that he was playing a naughty trick.
Yeah, he ran over a gray band and he knew he did, and he flipped around to see if it was alive, and one of my buddies was behind him. So he took off. Anyway, the only person they saw was me, and then they saw the dead snake. So I got the blame for running over the snake. Years later, the kid that was riding with him told me what the whole story really was. There were a lot of characters out here. Bob Mackin was here in the '70s and '80s, and Bob he was a hell of a collector. Some people liked him, some people didn't, but uh, he was very knowledgeable about this area. He spent a lot of time here, and he probably collected, or let's say observed, as many Alterna as anybody I know. Um, Craig Hodgson was here a lot. He was a good friend of mine. Bob Haas was out here a lot then. Um, I guess there were a lot of interesting characters that were here on a regular basis, but there were a lot of some of the best characters were just first timers passing through, and uh, from different countries, different states. We met a lot of people from most of them we never saw again, but still pretty interesting back then.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's that area is world known for going out there, and they might not know where to go. One of my first trips out there, I was out there, and someone pulled up and asked how's it going, and they got out and started talking to us, and then I realized it was an English guy, and he was just over here by himself, just sending it, seeing what he was gonna find, and I'd be curious to know how that guy's trip went, because
Yeah,
ran into him and talked to him for 10 minutes and no idea who he was.
we had one story that I always remember as a German guy, young German guy, flew in on the West Coast and bought an old Plymouth and drove down here from California in this old Plymouth that wasn't sure would make it back. He came through Arizona and New Mexico and had zero luck. I don't think he'd seen a single snake until he got here. and he wasn't seeing anything here either. But and he didn't speak a word of English. But we kind of guided him through the whole deal. He at that Plymouth, the headlights on it were like these orange. It's like two monkeys holding candles on the hood of the car or something. I don't see how he could see anything. But anyway, he did finally catch a sabak and saw a couple other snakes. And the funniest part I thought was Mackin gave him a couple of lepidus. He was going to sew them in the lining of his coat and, and go on the plane with them. And we always wondered if the snakes bit him and he died, or if security shot and killed him. But we didn't really expect him to make it back home either way.
It's so crazy, right? But I mean that, and that's the thing, who knows if those animals were the establishing lines of what's in Europe now,
Yeah, could have been. Uh,
It's
he he was scared to death of Americans. I remember that because everybody had guns, and Mackin always brought down guns with him. And he was from Seattle, and he would bring guns and shoot during the day and stuff. Scared this German guy to death. He slept in his car the whole time he was here, and he would roll the windows up and sleep in his car locked with the windows up, and it was like 104 degrees, you know.
jeez.
Mackin's favorite term was, it's your time to go down there and turn him over and baste him. He
Yeah, right. That's insane. That's insane.
yeah,
It's so interesting, right? Because I mean, when people were going out there early on, I mean, that was really the middle of nowhere. I
oh,
mean,
it
it's
was,
still the middle of nowhere.
yeah, yeah. And back then, there was no law down here, none. I mean, they finally put a deputy down here, uh, mid '80s, I guess. But before that, it was 90 miles to Alpine to the sheriff's office. You know, we never saw law down here, and the newspaper in Midland did a story entitled "The Lawless State of Terlingua." It was kind of funny.
Yeah, and you still meet those characters there, that are
Yeah,
have that mentality. I
yeah,
know I've definitely ran into my fair share of peculiar incidences which are unique to Terlingua, where you go,
yeah.
what was that? But
Especially, yeah, back in the '70s and early '80s, there were a few communes here, and most of them were guys that came back from Vietnam and weren't fitting in anywhere else. And this was somewhere that everybody was just, they were who they were, you know.
yeah.
Nobody asked questions. You know, nobody knew your past, and nobody cared.
What was what's been your scariest experience out there?
Uh, you know, I guess really back when I was, I guess late '80s, I was working for the river guide service, and one of the guides, a Mexican on the Mexico side, shot one of our river guides in the leg and shot and killed one of his passengers.
Oh,
And that was kind of wild because we didn't know why. You know, it was just, uh, we'd never had any problems like that before. There were certain places along the river where they grew weed, and we knew where those places were, and we knew what time of the year, and we just avoided them. But some certain times of the year we could go on the Mexico side and do whatever we wanted. Certain times you just didn't.
yeah.
But anyway, that it turned out to just be a couple of kids plinking around with a small caliber rifle, trying to scare the tourists, and accidentally hit one, then decided to kill the witnesses. But uh, the guide made it out, and the wife eventually. Other river guides went through all during the night looking for her, and finally found her and got her out of there.
Wow. What a crazy jump. I mean, like it's crazy to be shooting at people and then didn't go well. We accidentally hit one. We got to kill them all now.
Yeah,
That's crazy logic there.
two young kids that just made a bad mistake.
Yeah. Wow.
Sure, the cartels took care of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so you did you were early on you were working with breeding different tortoises at a certain point?
I've been breeding tortoises since the '80s, and I still have quite a few. Well, I cut way. I retired a couple of years ago, a few years ago, and I cut my collection way down. Just started traveling and goofing off for a couple of years, and then came out here and bought a piece of property, and I've been building ever since. So I still don't have much of a collection, but I have leopard tortoises and ivory sulcata
Gotcha.
and few things like that.
Okay. And so you said mainly sulcatas? I'm sorry I interrupted you there for a second. I spoke over you.
Well, I had quite a few sulcata, but uh, I'm down to just a few normals, and I have ivory males and het for ivory females, and then leopard tortoises and a few cherry heads. Uh, that's about it.
Gotcha. That's cool. And then what was yeah, I'm sorry. I'm jumping around more than I feel like I should here, so I apologize.
No
Um
problem.
with we'll get back to alternate talk I guess for a little bit here because I think that's I know that's what gets me excited. So your first Alterna was found in the Christmas Mountains. You said pretty stereotypical animal. What other kind of Alterna pop out in your mind as particularly good finds or interesting stories?
I guess my holy grail was a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago now. I guess I was walking some private property in the Christmas Mountains, and I left my Jeep. I walked up the hill, realized I'd forgotten my extra battery, so I turned around, walked back to my Jeep. About 15 feet from my Jeep was a big adult female Alterna, light phase. So I did my dance and, everything you have to do when you find a cool Alterna, especially a female, and bagged her up and went on with my route and made a big circle and came back to my Jeep. And there was a male, dark phase with nice orange bands in exactly the same spot as that female. That was early May, and of course she was ovulating, and he was tracking her, and I put them together that night, and they bred. And that
Oh
was,
wow.
I mean, that's what everybody. That's a perfect pair, I mean, short of finding them locked up, that's about as good as it gets for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Where the chances to find one and then to find two. And I mean that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Especially that time of year to really keep pounding that area. I
and
remember the first one. Sorry.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I just remember the first one I found. It ended up being a male, but man, I was ready to fight for that cut to stay there because I didn't know at the time, and I was like, if this is a female, there might be another one, and I was ready to throw blows to keep that cut that night.
Where was that?
That was on Juneau Road on the S curves.
Oh yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. That's been a that's been a good spot for a lot of people. A lot of alternative came from that S curve.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, right? I mean, there is quite a few, and you hear good success there all the time. I know my buddy found one or found two where he was coming back from vacation with his wife, and he said, "Hey, I want to show you where we go," and she was like, "All right, I'll go." And he did one lap down that road and found two, and his wife turned to him and said, "I thought you said this was difficult."
Yeah, it didn't happen again.
No, no, it hasn't happened again.
I did find two on Juneau Road, and I missed the first one. I'd taken my kids fishing down at Baker's Crossing, and we had just pulled out of there. It was right at it wasn't even dusk, but it was the night of the full moon, so the moon was already up and the sun was just barely going down. I pulled out of Baker's and got up to about 55, and there was a small light phase blares that right in the middle of my lane, and I straddled it, and the brush came right up to the road on both sides, and as fast as I was going, by the time I got stopped and got back, it was long gone. Never saw it again. But,
Oh,
and my daughter was with me. She was young. She she went many many miles with me hunting alternative. She used to do her homework in the front seat and then crawl in the back and go to bed. And I would hunt until wee hours and take her home, put her to bed, get her up and get. Well, she would usually wake me up and I'd take her to school. But she went to school here in Terlingua through the eighth grade. That was one reason we left at the time. The school here only went to the eighth grade. After that, they had to bus from Terlingua to Alpine.
mm,
So So I took her back to where she had started school so she could finish with some of her friends and not have to do that 180-mile bus ride every day.
yeah.
But yeah, she kept patting me on the back saying, it's okay, you'll find another one. I'm like, you never find two in one night for one thing. And this is a fun night. We weren't even going to hunt. We just came here to go fishing. But we
Yeah.
made a few more passes and headed out. And on the last pass out, I found the second one. A
Oh,
little
wow.
little alternative phase, and she said, "See, I told you you'd catch another one."
How sweet is that? What a good story.
Yeah, she was a good running buddy. Still is.
Yeah, that's cool. Does she still get out there every once in a while?
She does. She was out here just a week or so ago. She brought her kids out here, and they're hooked on it. They all love it out here. I've taken all of them snake hunting at different times. My grandson came almost every summer and spent a week with me at least, and maybe 2 weeks sometimes. We always came out here for a few days or as long as we could. He loves it. So it's a family affair, It's something you can do with your kids and grandkids now. And I've got a great granddaughter that I hope to get to take on her first collecting trip. We'll
That's
see.
awesome. That's awesome. I mean, and that's that's the dream come true, right? For the people you care about to have those same passions that you do.
Yep.
So often, you hear about that and people kind of burn the people out around them, but with sports and stuff like that. But
Yeah. I did that with 3 or 4 wives, but not my kids.
there you go. They couldn't, man. Got it. Snake hunting's important, man. It's important to get out there, set that precedent early on in the relationship. I'm going to do this, for me, 2 times a year for a week at a time,
Yeah.
come hell or high water.
Yeah. I've taken several girlfriends home from Terlingua and never saw them again.
Well, that might just be a Terlingua issue there.
I'm pretty sure it was being drug around all night long through the desert. No interest in it. But you find out pretty quick the strong from the weak out here.
yes, yes. One of my first trips I ever took my wife out there. Uh, we were trying to get from point A to point B, and we're going, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's something, and man, I lock the brakes up, and by the time I turn around and like I'm paying attention to her, I realize that she is stuck in the floorboard of the car with like her legs up and her butt down, and can't get out. Going, what the hell was that? I didn't until later that I almost stopped in front of a car right behind me, realized that her head had hit the rear view mirror and pushed it down. I was
Yeah.
like, holy crap, you were thrown all over the car.
Yeah.
But I saw the snake, so there we go.
What it's all about.
There you go. She's all right. She's all right, and I found a cool snake. what what are some of the other kind of iconic species out there. So we have like the lepidus that are out there. Any good lepidus stories or anything?
Um,
Besides the guy trying to smuggle some back, which is crazy.
no, I mean I've seen quite a few, and they're all so different. They're a lot like alternate from different areas, different patterns, different ground colors. They're I haven't seen. They're still over on the big hill, but we used to see a lot of lepidus in the Christmas and a lot of copperheads and a lot of milk snakes, but those those three are almost gone from there completely. Um,
Yes, sir.
I haven't seen a lepidus there in, gosh, 6 or 8 years. Um, it had been nearly 11 years since I'd seen a milk snake, and then I saw one about 2 years ago, but I haven't seen one since. Um, Trimorphs, lyre snakes are still here, and there's, they seem to be doing fairly well. I see more lyre snakes than I do alterna out here, and I think they're one of the coolest species. They're hard to keep because they're lizard eaters, but now and then the ones from Arizona you can usually get on mice, but the ones from here are pretty picky about their lizards. Um, I guess I've seen probably over the years everything that's here: black-headed snakes and blind snakes and things like that. They were probably not rare at all. Just you never see them above ground.
Yeah. Well, it's also location. You know what I mean? Just because something's more common in one area, to find it out there, that's a bigger deal for
Yeah,
sure. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen a lep in the Christmas mountains, and I don't think I have. I have seen a copperhead there, and I saw two, where one was DOR, and like we're walking right, and I always check the roads, and I look back and I see a squish snake run out there and move that snake off the road, and then we're walking back, and then there's another one right where that one was sniffing. So I assume the one that got hit was a was a male, or the one that got hit was a female, and then it was a male tracking her.
yeah.
And I think we
That's
moved that snake off the road about 3 times, and then when we came back through that area, that male had been hit right in that same spot.
oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what happened to a lot of them. They used to be fairly common. A friend, this is kind of weird to me, but a friend walks property on the west side of the road, and he says he sees them almost every time he walks. I walk property on the east side of the road, and I've never seen one up there. So they're in very isolated populations, if that the ones that are still there anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's like over by Sanderson. There's a cut I like to walk, and I had I had never seen a pick for many years, and then we were hunting this cut that we like to cut. We like to walk. We've pulled, I think, a total of 3 alterna off of it, and I can't remember how many picks I saw that night, but I think I saw like 10, and they were all moving in the same area, and it was all different animals because I took a picture of each one because I was like, oh wow, that's so cool. And they were all coming up a crack, and then they would disappear for a while, and then you'd see them pop back up crossing this little road and then going up the rock cut, and they were all moving that same direction.
Really,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like what that's where I feel like snake hunting, whatever's going on in their little minds. I think of it kind of like little pegs in a board that those animals need to hit those whatever those conditions are, and then they're going out,
Yeah,
and you'll see a lot of those animals moving. Where it seems like if you hear of one person catching alterna in a night, usually someone else found something somewhere else in that general area.
yeah, yeah. That kind of reminds me. Did I get you back?
All right, yes sir. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Sorry about that.
All good. All good.
I think I was telling a sabak story. I went out just to see if anything was moving on a full moon night and saw 9 sabaks on, this side of Fresno Creek, and was shocked. And so I went out the next night. Conditions, temperature, almost everything that I could see was identical. I went out for a couple hours and never saw a snake. So, like you say, when the time's right, they know it. We may not, but when it's right for one, it's right for all of them, I guess.
Yeah. And that's, that's something, right? Something that I know I definitely pay attention to, and everybody knows, and something you've referenced to tonight. The moon phases. What effect do you think that plays on snake movement, or when you're looking at that, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't think. I think from here east, I I believe they have more cover. I don't think even there you don't see as many crossing the road when the moon's up. But if you're walking cuts, you're pretty moon or no moon. If the conditions are right, I think you'll see some stuff. But when you get down here, there's just no cover for them, and that's my theory. And who knows? But
Yeah.
I have found alterna in on Juneau and full moon, but I've never found one out here, and I don't know anybody that has.
Hmm. Interesting. And that's, something that I feel like I've noticed, and it is more than likely very anecdotal. I mean, this is anecdotal 100%. But, on full moons, I feel like you see larger rattlesnakes out, and you'll see like bigger subbot kind of moving around. And I wonder if that is just kind of a size thing where they're less concerned about owls and stuff like that.
I think you might have something there. I agree. I do see a lot of rattlesnakes, mostly diamondbacks during the moon, but I found a diamondback on Christmas Day, so that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, don't for anyone listening, don't go out there and go, "Oh, I found an Atrox. It's going to be a good night." It
Yeah,
can be the worst conditions ever, and just cuz you see an Atrox does not mean it's going to be a productive evening.
definitely might be the only snake you see that night, unless it's another Atrox.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always the go-to, right? Might only see one snake tonight, but might be an alternative. But if it's an Atrox,
Yeah.
that don't count that for anything.
Yeah.
But well, very good. I feel like there's so many things I could hit on. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should ask you, or that you think's interesting, or just anything that should be said?
Well, I can't think of anything other than I think there's too much tension. People are too serious about it. I mean, I'm as serious as anybody. I moved out here. I gave up most everything to be out here during those times, but we still had fun, and I think a lot of the fun's gone for a lot of people. I think
Yeah.
we need to lighten up and just enjoy it while we can. I don't know how many more years. If it doesn't start raining pretty soon, you know, maybe the end for this place anyway.
Would hate to see that. Would hate to see that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we start to one of my kind of working hypothesis is that we're slowly seeing those animals, right? That there was a lot of pressure, through the kind of what, like mid 90s, where it was very active. You hear the stories of people in lines waiting for their turn to go down the cut. And I wonder, just that put so much pressure on those areas that there was a reduction in populations. And as time's going on and those populations are getting filled back up further back on their ranges, that we're slowly seeing those animals move back close to the road because they're running out of space back there.
Yeah,
You know.
that's always kind of the way I expected it to be. Is if you take this population out, that population is just going to move into this territory as long as there's food source. There's something's going to come eat it. But I I haven't seen a let up in people hunting out there. Except for down here, there not many people come down here anymore because it's just too hard to hunt. They're just you look at Sanderson, they catch 5 or 10 a night. And you come down here and somebody caught one last month. Uh, it's a whole different ball game, and most people don't like that. It's always been my favorite, just because it's a little more of a challenge. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that's the case in a lot of places as long as the conditions. There's I don't know what the rainfall average would be for Sanderson, but I know they still get a lot of rain compared to what we get down here. Uh, and so they're still catching a lot of snakes. But there's just there's I, the thing that makes me think that it's dying off here is the fact I that we used to only find. I mean, not only, but the large majority of what we would find would be yearling males. You know, uh,
Mm.
and they're out looking for their place to be. I haven't found a yearling out here in 7 or 8 years. Everything I've
Mm.
found have been adults,
Yeah.
and it kind of makes me think they're just either they're not reproducing or it's so dry the eggs aren't hatching. I'm not sure, but the numbers being down, plus there's not a younger generation coming in to take over. They can't keep going without that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's a scary thought, and I hope that's not the case. That's one of the upsides and one of the downsides to Texas is the large amount of private property that we have. Where you know we might lose them in those areas that are accessible to everybody, but hopefully they stay strong in those areas where we don't have access to them, even if it's a lower number. There's no pressure on them.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, and that's our only hope.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point about out there being the hard mode of alterna hunting, that is definitely the case, and I 100% agree with you that is one of my favorite spots to hunt for the challenge aspect of it. At this point, I just want to see how much I can abuse myself, and then it pay off. The one night out of a week.
Yeah, when you do finally see one, it's special.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the big hill animal I found. That was many years of we walk and we walk, and it's the hardest walking you can do on River Road,
Yeah,
and just do that all night, and yeah, it paid off after a while. And then a lyre snake that night too, my first and only lyre snake, which I know you've had good success with those, but I just unlocked them in the game, and so maybe I'll find more in the future.
yeah, they seem, and a couple of my friends disagree with me always, but when I see trimorphs, I see alternator and vice versa. It seems like, um, and lepidus. It's back in the day. It seemed like those three snakes all moved under the same conditions. So if you saw one, you good chance you're going to see the others.
Yes, sir. Well, so far that is checking out with my experience in that area for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, very good. I feel like we'll call it a night for tonight, and I appreciate your time. And you do leather working, so I think you do that right, and that's something you
Yeah.
offer to people.
I was a saddle maker for 50 years, and since I retired, I've been making knives, and I've really gotten into that and enjoy it. Um, I'm building myself a house and a shop right now. where I can keep making knives and saddles for a while.
Excellent. If anyone's looking for a saddle or a knife, what's the best way for those people to get in contact with you?
I guess find me on Facebook. Just probably look for Ricky Green, Terlingua, Texas. I should pop up.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight. And once we end this, just don't dip out, and we'll chat for a couple more minutes while this gets uploaded. And thank you again so much for your time.
Sure,
And,
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.